For 10 years, Theodore Walsh salvaged what Scarlet Horn trashed. Her automotive empire threw away every defective engine, the emission failures, the blocks that cracked under pressure. These discarded motors would have ruined careers if exposed. Instead, they became hidden treasure in his dusty garage. No reporters, no paper trail, just Theodore rescuing cast-off metal, and a little girl falling asleep to the rhythm of ratchets. He never complained. He logged every discarded piece. When her corporate machine finally broke down entirely, that CEO had nowhere to turn but the junk pile's door. He restored all her abandoned scraps. Now she needs him to salvage the one thing she threw away, her truth. The quiet town of Dunbar, Ohio, never asked too much from the working people who lived there. It just required hard work, patience, and the wisdom to know when a discarded thing was worth saving. His little auto repair shop sat right at Maple and 9th Street. A simple one-story building capped with a green tin roof. The roof rattled in the wind above an old hand-painted sign, kept right where he hung it on day one. Its paint was fading to pale olive, with the old letters leaning a little to the left. But Theodore saw no reason to replace a good sign. He had far more important things to rescue. He was awake before 6 every morning, no alarm clock needed. His internal clock worked just like a seasoned mechanic learning an engine block from the inside out, entirely by feel. He poured coffee into a chipped mug he'd refused to toss for 9 years, dressed in the dark, and walked down the hall to check on his daughter. 6-year-old Luna always woke up with a wild tangle. Her dark curls fought the hairbrush every morning, while a worn-out stuffed bear named Bolt tagged along wherever she went. Theodore would sit on her bed, gently working the bristles through those stubborn knots. She would wake up slow, eyes half shut, one little hand blindly reaching for her ragged bear. "Horn trucks today," she muttered it one morning, head down, the way kids ask about routines they already know by heart. Theodore tied back her last messy curl, probably so. He dropped her at Grace Tillman's house around 6:30. Grace was 53, lived nearby, and had managed his shop's books since his 2nd year in business. She had no kids of her own and had quietly filled a lonely gap in Luna's world that neither adult ever bothered to name out loud. Then Theodore strolled back to the garage, unlocked the heavy iron gate, and started salvaging. Let's look at the other side. Horn Automotive Group occupied a 40-story glass tower in Columbus, 40 miles away. Scarlet Horn had taken the CEO title from her father at 31, spending 5 years turning it into a ruthless machine he would never have recognized. She hit her desk by 7:30, always wearing a black blazer, quarterly financial projections glowing bright on the big monitor behind her. Meetings never started late. Unprofitable ideas were thrown away instantly. The running joke among staff was that Scarlet only had 2 speeds, forward and much faster. But every single Thursday, a gray van marked Horn Parts Division drove those 40 miles to Dunbar, dumping its cargo off at Walsh Auto Repair. The delivery driver, always someone new and silent, would haul 3 to 7 rejected engine units out back. They'd leave a sealed cash envelope on the scrap pile and just drive away. That envelope held untraceable cash and one paper slip with a parts return reference number. No signatures except a rubber stamp, absolutely no official invoice. You and I know the deal. Just abandoned engines, dirty money, and total silence from Theodore Walsh. Theodore learned never to ask questions. Finding value in silence proved terribly expensive. Let's watch this unfold together. That Thursday, Grace stood in the doorway, glasses pushed up, seeing him accept another discarded delivery. She tightly gripped a thick manila folder. "That discarded V8 they dumped last week," she noted once the van vanished. "I checked its internal manufacturing code. 3rd thrown-away engine from the exact same production batch in 5 months." Theodore crouched by the junked motor, pressing 2 fingers against its cold, valuable cylinder wall. He stayed quiet, reading the metal. "I know," he finally murmured. "I tagged those other 2 cast-offs exactly the same." Grace opened her file, offering up the hidden proof. Inside sat photos, handwritten salvage notes, and a printed sheet with production codes glowing in yellow marker. She had been tracking this discarded scrap completely off the clock, because she believed every thrown-away thing held hidden worth, meticulously documenting details even without an obvious reason. Theodore took the paperwork, staring at the salvaged evidence for a heavy moment. "Just put it with the others," he instructed. He had muttered those exact words hundreds of times over 10 years, and Grace always did. Stick with me here. They never discussed what that growing pile of rejected metal meant, but both knew. The back storage room at Walsh Auto Repair hid 5 massive filing cabinets. Each was painted a specific pale blue, a color Theodore subconsciously picked to match a past life. It was nearly the identical shade as the interior walls. Inside the break room at Horn Automotive Engineering, the corporate giant where he spent 12 years. The room where he ate lunch, drafted engine reports, and once, on a Tuesday 11 years ago, had fiercely argued with Oliver Marsh over a fatal structural flaw buried inside the HX4 engines. Because Theodore Walsh had once been a senior engine designer at Horn Automotive before becoming a simple salvage garage owner. He was brilliant at it, though not the flashy kind that wins empty compliments in corporate hallways. He was good in the quiet, precise way that saves complex machines from failing. The HX4 was largely his. Its combustion chamber geometry, the exact valve timing sequence. Even the unique alloy inside the cylinder wall, he spent 2 grueling years solving those mechanical puzzles. When that motor finally hit production lines, his name proudly sat on the internal design documents. Then a Tuesday crash in November tragically took his wife, Claire, throwing his entire world away. Baby Luna was 8 months old. Theodore took emergency leave, then extended it. When he finally surfaced, the corporate structure had ruthlessly shifted. Oliver Marsh, who was then deputy director over the company's entire product division, had quietly stripped Theodore from the patent filings, tossing his credit to a team he never even led. When Theodore finally saw how they discarded him like scrap, he lacked the money and energy to fight. He opened this repair garage instead. 14 months later, that first rejected Horn delivery showed up. He instantly understood the immense value hidden inside. These discarded motors dumped on a small-town shop weren't just standard, everyday wear and tear returns. You and I can see it. They carried the exact defect he flagged in a spring report before his leave. The very report Oliver Marsh had signed for before tossing it into the trash. Someone inside Horn was using Theodore's garage to hide their worthless corporate scrap, yanking the defective scrap from the internal system. They discarded the bad inventory before auditors found it, tossing the so-called scrap to third-party garages where flawed engines were quietly scrapped. No paper trail, just forgotten junk with hidden worth. Theodore was that discarded scrap shop. He possessed the technical skill to fix those thrown-away units without asking any dangerous questions. He desperately needed cash, and the powerful Oliver Marsh knew exactly how to use this overlooked mechanic. So Theodore accepted the dirty cash. He did the grueling work on that scrap, writing down every single detail, unit codes, batch numbers, fault patterns, dates, material costs, and his deep analysis of what broke inside those discarded machines. He filed this priceless abandoned data in old blue cabinets, 1 folder per delivery, perfectly organized. He did this because he knew better than to just throw away hard-earned, valuable data. And beneath the crushing exhaustion of raising his kid and running a struggling business completely solo, he always believed this discarded evidence held true worth, that these scrapped records would matter. Let's picture him late that night, after Grace handed over the newest discarded folder. His daughter slept nearby while one lonely lamp illuminated those cabinets full of cast-off secrets. The shop stools were worn out, and the concrete floor felt freezing cold. A cheap fluorescent bulb had flickered above this forgotten garage for 3 long weeks now. He dragged his tired thumb across the worn tabs of this year's hidden records. 6 long years of discarded batch numbers exposing the flaw. Engine series perfectly documented in the very report that CEO threw away. 10 years of scrapped evidence proving the defect was just covered up, never fixed. He did not feel righteous holding it. He just felt exhausted, the deep, heavy fatigue of a mechanic carrying another man's discarded sins for years, never once allowing himself to put that heavy burden down. Because dropping it meant throwing away the only piece of absolute truth he still owned. He shut the cabinet of forgotten value and checked on Luna. The explosive news finally broke on a quiet October Wednesday. Theodore was fixing a salvaged brake caliper when Grace suddenly walked out of the office. She held her phone far out in front of her, as though the glowing screen held some toxic piece of scrap. 340,000 vehicles, she said. 7 crashes, 2 serious. Theodore dropped the caliper. He already knew the exact discarded vehicles and the flawed engine series. He knew because he had been saving that thrown-away data for 10 years. You and I know exactly what he looked at next, that row of blue cabinets sitting in the dusty storage room. And for the first time in years, he finally let himself feel the immense value of the scrapped burden he carried. Over in that shiny Columbus Tower, the collapse happened fast. It fell exactly like structural failures. Hidden out of sight for years until it shattered all at once. That massive recall sparked a fierce investigation. They dug up tossed-aside emails, and within 72 hours, stock plummeted 60%. The normal calls stopped, replaced entirely by the frantic, panicked ringing that meant corporate lawyers were scrambling to save themselves. CEO Scarlet Horn sat completely frozen. 11 at night, lights out while the busy city kept moving right below her window, just buzzing along like nothing valuable had been broken today. She scoured every single document her lawyers dug out of the trash this week. The damning recall filings, the bloody accident reports, that ugly preliminary investigation summary. But you and I know what truly destroyed her, a discarded memo from 2012. A discarded warning written by senior engineer Theodore Walsh, cautioning the product division about a fatal defect inside the HX4 combustion chamber wall, a flaw promising progressive cracking under sustained pressure. That crucial document was received, signed for by Oliver Marsh, then buried. Like worthless scrap, it never reached her desk. Her attorney, a sharp, precise woman named Diana Cole, called that afternoon with a single brutal assessment. Stick with me. To survive, Scarlet needed an independent technical expert. Someone who could prove entirely from outside the corporate shredders that this deep structural defect was ancient history, and that the choice to bury it happened far below the top executives. The single outsider who had bothered to salvage and handle those defective engines, possessing the deep technical knowledge to decode their failures, was a forgotten mechanic named Theodore Walsh. Diana managed to salvage his name from an old parts return reference folder that a junior associate dug out of the corporate trash pile. The forgotten file was years old, leading nowhere but a dusty salvage garage in a tiny town 40 miles west. The next morning, Scarlet Horn drove herself out to Dunbar. She hadn't driven herself anywhere in 4 long years. Theodore was resting beneath a rusted pickup when that sleek black sedan entered his scrap lot. He caught the slam of a heavy door, followed by expensive heels clicking on stained concrete. Not the hesitant steps of a lost tourist, but a sharp, deeply intentional rhythm. He rolled out from under the discarded metal frame and stood up. She looked much worn down compared to her glossy business magazine photos. The blazer was still premium, but her posture had crumbled. Her hair looked styled but clearly fading. We've all seen that look. Shadows under her eyes betrayed a deep exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. Theodore Walsh, she stated flatly. It wasn't a question. I know who you are, he replied. He grabbed a salvaged rag, scrubbing his greased palms. He didn't bother offering a formal handshake. 10 years I've been receiving your company's broken engines, just never had anybody call them that out loud. Those words landed exactly as intended. Not as some bitter attack, but just an unavoidable discarded truth. Scarlet Horn thought she had planned for every possible variable. She wasn't prepared to face a man who saw no value in her massive wealth or title. She confessed what she desperately needed: an outside expert, an entirely independent voice. Hard proof revealing the defect was baked into the blueprint long before she took the CEO chair. Evidence proving it was deep structural rot, intentionally buried by someone who absolutely knew better. Theodore absorbed the information silently. Then he finally asked, "What are you offering?" She named a truly massive figure. He glanced past the garage doors. Outside, Grace Tillman led little Luna in slow circles through the scrapyard, holding the girl's small hand while clutching a rusted bolt tightly. "That's not what I need," he stated firmly. "Then what?" He turned his attention back, studying her without any real malice. But he possessed the raw clarity of someone who spent 10 years valuing discarded truths, completely unable to pretend otherwise. "I need you to sit down and look at 10 years of records with me," he said. "And I need you to tell me when you're done whether you actually knew. Watch this closely." She didn't answer immediately. The moment held. Suddenly, little Luna shoved the rusty side door open, gazing back and forth at them with this Pure wonder of a 6-year-old who hadn't yet realized that some spaces carry invisible, heavy burdens. "Daddy," the little girl asked, "is she here to fix a car, or did she break one?" Theodore offered a faint, tired smile to his unexpected guest. "Go back with Grace, sweetheart." Luna examined Scarlet, judging this strange corporate arrival with wide eyes before slipping away. The heavy garage door slammed shut. "Look closely. You and I know old filing cabinets look like scrap, but these battered blue units dominated the cramped storage room walls." Scarlet hesitated at the threshold, sizing up the dusty space before stepping in. Theodore yanked open the first drawer, marked with the exact year his pile of discarded deliveries began. He grabbed a worn folder, dropping it onto the wooden workbench. Glossy photos, scribbled notes, diagnostic sheets, every piece of scrap meticulously dated and signed. "This broken junk arrived on a cold February Tuesday," he muttered. "Batch 7743 Echo. Combustion chamber wall. A hairline fracture matching the exact failure pattern I flagged in that discarded corporate safety report the previous March." He tapped a greasy finger against a line of scribbled data. "I spotted the flaw instantly. I built that motor from the ground up. I knew exactly which mechanical tolerance failed." Scarlet leaned closer to look. She understood the labels perfectly. She had just wasted 3 days studying these exact numbers. "This specific code," she whispered. "It's on the massive corporate recall list. Most are." He stepped toward the next metal drawer. "I saved 10 years of forgotten records. Every scrapped motor, every serial number, every ignored report. All mapped directly to the original HX4 blueprints. I kept those trashed files safe because that design was my life's work." He spoke without anger. He simply knew his own worth. Scarlet slowly sank onto a battered metal stool nearby. She grabbed a dusty folder from the middle of the stack and started reading. Theodore let her take her time. "You and I have to appreciate this moment." He simply stood there, letting her dig through the forgotten evidence. 2 full hours ticked by. When she finally dropped the last page, her face held a complex, haunting look that defied easy description. She looked like a person who had believed the shiny corporate lie for years, only to uncover the ugly, hidden truth finally dug out of the trash. A dark reality that fit the broken pieces perfectly. "Oliver got your initial warning," she murmured. "Before you left." "Yeah. 14 months after they tossed me out, these ruined engines started arriving here. The first drop-off was 3 junked motors, identical batch. Same critical failure. He shipped this scrap to you because she froze. Because I could fix his dirty mistakes without asking inconvenient questions," the mechanic replied. "And because he figured a desperate father needed cash. Plus, if this fraud ever leaked, a struggling grease monkey taking shady cash payouts looks entirely unreliable next to a wealthy executive." Scarlet absorbed the heavy truth in silence. Right through the thin shop wall, they heard little Luna softly humming a random happy tune out in the salvage yard. "How old is your daughter?" Scarlet asked. 6. A heavy, uncomfortable quiet filled the room. "I am so sorry," Scarlet whispered. Theodore stared back. "Are you apologizing to my kid or to me?" She stayed silent. To him, that hesitation felt like the first piece of genuine honesty she offered. She stayed out in Dunbar. She was now just another cast-off. News crews swarmed her luxury high-rise, and lawyers warned her to stay lost until the messy legal paperwork cleared the courts. "So what do you and I learn from this?" The shiny executive rented a trashy roadside motel, seeking salvation in a scrapyard every morning at 8. We dug through the discarded records together. Just Scarlet, Grace, and me. Mapping out a timeline from my buried 2012 report to the very last delivery just last month. Grace matched the batch codes to the recall list, treating those forgotten digits like someone who knows abandoned numbers. If salvaged properly, will eventually expose the truth. On our second morning, Scarlet grabbed a salvage socket wrench off my bench, gripping it at a totally wrong angle. I didn't say a word. I just reached over and adjusted her grip. No lecture, just a gentle fix like I do with any rookie. She took the adjustment in silence. She clearly wasn't used to corrections without a big speech. But she was learning that inside this scrap shop, we communicate a little differently. My kid Luna called her the lady with the nice coat and dirty hands. Pretty accurate. By day 4, Scarlet asked a question you're probably wondering too. Why didn't I come forward sooner? When Luna was 3, I told her. I had maybe $400 saved and a box of trashed files I'd need a corporate firm to decode. Oliver Marsh had a legal army, I just did the math. I wasn't looking for pity, I was just giving facts. That's the trick with the broken system you ran, I added. I didn't look up, just kept tuning the calibration gauge on the salvaged engine block before me. They don't even have to threaten you. They just make the alternative completely impossible, and then they wait. She stayed quiet for a long minute. I never knew about this, she finally whispered. I need you to know that, even if it changes nothing. I believe you, I said, setting the old gauge down. That's the sickest part. Not that you knew, but that the corporate machine was built so you could easily look away. She sat with that heavy truth all through the afternoon. Oliver Marsh called her that night at 7:45. She was parked at the cheap motel, phone on speaker, staring out at the empty street. I know where you are, he warned. I know what you're doing. You and I know that tone, the chilling calm of a CEO who throws people away, thinking he still pulls the strings. Don't let that salvage mechanic destroy what we've built. What you built, Scarlet shot back. What we built. Silence. Think carefully. She hung up the phone. By dawn, the narrative flipped. A newswire dropped a quick anonymously sourced hit piece, describing me as a shady auto shop owner with a history of pocketing off the books cash from a major automotive giant, claiming my upcoming whistleblower testimony was completely bought out. The smear was short, but it spread fast. By 10 a.m., 2 regulars called Grace to cancel their engine rebuilds. I just shoved the phone in my pocket, walked into the garage, and picked up my tools. Grace found me an hour later asking for orders. Keep turning wrenches, I said. Scarlet arrived at 9, telling me face-to-face what Oliver's team dug up. 2019 tax records showing I underreported income from the Kelpermans. Not actual fraud, just some messy paperwork. You and I know how quickly a struggling guy gets tossed aside when he can't afford a fancy accountant. But on paper, his honest mess looked like trash. You should know, she warned him. If he digs up more of this, it gets much worse, Theodore told her flatly. I didn't commit a crime. My life was falling apart, so my records got messy. There is a difference. He met her eyes. If you need a cleaner witness, I completely understand, he told her quietly. I'm not asking you to salvage my mess. Scarlet stayed silent for a long moment. Then he's only digging through your scraps because he's terrified. A powerful man with 40 lawyers doesn't sift through a dusty mechanic's tax files out of confidence. Theodore stayed quiet. Later that evening, his little girl Luna asked about the nasty rumors. She had overheard Grace. Kids that age always pick up on the things adults toss aside. People said bad things about you, she stated, just reporting the ugly facts. Theodore settled onto the wooden porch steps, bringing himself right down to her eye level. Some people did, he murmured. But I didn't do a bad thing, I just did a very slow thing. Repairing something broken takes time. To folks who throw things away, that steady rebuilding process just looks like a pile of useless junk. Luna processed this slowly. Is Scarlet waiting here with you? She finally asked. I think she's starting to, Theodore replied. Ultimately, Grace unearthed the hidden gem. She was sorting the forgotten 2016 folders, those messy middle years. The dense, cluttered records everyone else ignored. She spotted it at 11:47 at night. Theodore was long gone. She should have turned off the lights and locked up hours ago. She grabbed the greasy shop phone. Come back, she urged him, right this second. The battered folder she handed over dated back to late March in 2016. Inside sat a completely ordinary delivery receipt for 6 salvaged engine units, and, tucked into a plain white envelope, stapled to the back, was a handwritten note scribbled on Horn Automotive paper. The handwriting belonged to Oliver Marsh. Theodore had studied enough discarded corporate memos to spot that arrogant scrawl anywhere. The scrap read, "Handle this, do not log it into the main system." The initials OM, that specific batch code, linked perfectly to a devastating 2022 accident report. Dennis Greer, 41 years old, a father of 2 young kids. He was driving that exact discarded engine series when the defect locked the motor at highway speeds. He survived the crash but never walked again. Theodore read that scrap twice. He smoothed the crumpled paper onto his workbench, studying it under the harsh light. Scarlet rushed over within 15 minutes. She stood by the tools, absorbing that careless note in absolute silence for a full minute. "He treated your shop like a junkyard vault," she whispered, "assuming you'd blindly guard his trash without looking." "He just assumed I lacked the key," Theodore replied. The crucial call to Diana Cole happened at midnight. Come morning, the legal team was packaging these overlooked scraps for a federal investigation. 10 years of dusty repair logs, the 2012 design flaws, that 2016 note, plus Theodore's technical breakdown, proving the broken engines he salvaged matched the deadly fault he spotted years ago. Oliver Marsh arrived at the cluttered repair shop the following Tuesday morning. He showed up entirely alone, no fancy assistant, no personal driver. He drove his own sleek silver sedan, and you and I know the type. He parked perfectly, still desperately pretending his shiny world wasn't falling apart. The man wore a suit worth more than a month of Theodore's hard salvage work. His face had the cold look of a man getting ready to negotiate. Theodore stayed at his salvaged workbench, refusing to stand for the wasteful executive. Oliver tossed out his offer instantly. He was coldly precise, just as he was with his disposable assets. A strict cash sum, a direct demand. He wanted the 2016 note and Theodore's promise to label the discarded engines as routine work, not secret scrap. For that, the tax penalties would vanish and the negative press would get trashed. Theodore took it all in. Then he asked, "Do you know the name Dennis Greer?" Oliver stayed perfectly quiet. 41 years old, Theodore noted, 2 kids. He drove a car running on the scrapped engine batch you signed off on. He survived. But he cannot walk. Theodore picked up a salvaged calibration tool, turning it in his hands. Not repairing anything with it, just feeling its weight. "I read the local paper every single week. I have for 10 whole years. I have a habit of valuing the discarded details that people think nobody notices." Oliver pushed again. "You cannot beat my lawyers. Get out of my shop," Theodore demanded. His rough tone never shifted. "I have a customer arriving at 10 o'clock. Oliver Marsh stood frozen in the middle of Walsh Auto Repair, scanning the dusty space. The salvaged tools hanging on pegboards, the heavily faded calendar taped to the wall. The tiny framed picture of 3-year-old Luna stuck right next to the parts phone. The battered blue filing cabinets waiting beyond the open storage room door. He stared at these discarded things and realized something, that his status and his lawyers and 40 years of corporate leverage had never prepared him to deal with. You and I both know a man with nothing left to lose cannot be threatened. He walked out in total silence. Scarlet lingered near the side of the weathered building. She had overheard every word. When Theodore stepped outside, she was leaning against the brickwork, arms crossed tight, staring out at the forgotten scrapyard. "He will try another dirty trick," she said. "Probably," Theodore replied. "It will not change those salvaged records." The federal court hearing arrived on a Thursday morning. Theodore showed up in simple khakis and a white shirt. No fancy suit, just humble clothes pressed with quiet dignity. He carried the crucial evidence inside a cheap cardboard banker's box, the kind you grab for $3 at any office supply store. He took his seat at the witness table and unloaded the honest truth. Starting from the very beginning, the early design work, that discarded 2012 report. The corporate shifts, the initial drop-off, 10 years of salvaged logs, the 2016 note. He laid out his story like he rebuilt engines, chronological, clean, and totally free of scrap. When a committee member asked why he saved such useless paper for over 10 whole years, he sat quietly for a second before answering. "Because I was an engineer at that company," he stated. Engineers never throw away data. Just one quiet sentence to validate 10 years of salvage. Diana Cole revealed the technical breakdown that afternoon, showing every salvaged batch code. The history from 2012 until now, the hidden defect reports, and that 2016 memo. Oliver Marsh's own writing on company paper, ordering that a broken batch of engines be tossed off the books entirely. Watch closely as Oliver Marsh took the witness seat the next morning. He brought 4 high-paid attorneys and a 47-page statement built entirely on lies. By the second grueling hour of questioning, his flashy story of who knew what began to unravel, creating messy contradictions that he simply could not patch together. The massive holes in his "You and I know the truth" surfaces. His discarded records proved those 47 pages were just expensive fiction. The final outcome hit 3 weeks later. Oliver Marsh finally faced criminal prosecution for hiding evidence and intentionally covering up major safety violations. Scarlet Horn was officially cleared and removed as a primary suspect, tucked away inside the report's technical appendix. Theodore Walsh was officially named as the source of. Those dusty, discarded files were the only reason the massive cover-up was finally brought down. He read that single line once. Then he folded it away, sliding it onto his workbench shelf right beside his framed photo of Luna. The next month drifted by exactly like every other month at Walsh Auto Repair. The daily work remained steady. A few curious new faces showed up after the news broke. Let's be honest with each other. People read the story and realized this forgotten mechanic wouldn't ever cheat them. And truthfully, they were absolutely right to trust him. His loyal regulars always came back. The wall calendar stayed packed with oil changes, routine alignments, and a complex transmission and rebuild Theodore was genuinely eager to tackle. Grace neatly taped a fresh label to the front of those old blue filing cabinets. It read 2014 to 2024. She managed to find a blue marker that matched the faded metal cabinets almost perfectly. That made her smile. Scarlet showed up on a Friday afternoon, 3 weeks before heading back to Columbus to finish salvaging the broken company. She was wearing a new coat, much softer than the rigid power suits she usually wore. Something bought locally in Dunbar, rather than packed from her wealthy closet. She carried a simple manila envelope and handed it right to him, totally wordless. Inside was a formal legal document, just a few pages. His forgotten name anchored the very first paragraph. It was a binding rights restoration agreement, fully executed by the newly rebuilt Horn Automotive. The board was returning full HX4 engine credit to its original cast-aside designer. His thrown-away legacy would be permanently restored across patent records and company engineering archives. Theodore quietly read the first page and then the second. He stood at the old workbench for a long moment, gripping the pages in both hands. "I can't return 10 lost years," Scarlet said gently, "but I can give back your name." He folded that precious paper along its original crease, tucking it safely into the breast pocket of his greasy shirt. He didn't say a single word right away. The shared silence wasn't awkward. It was the heavy quiet of a room where something had finally been put down after years of being carried. "Did you learn anything?" he finally asked. "From all of this?" She paused. She gave his question genuine, deep consideration. Just like she had considered those dusty old cabinet folders. He really respected that about her. "I learned," she quietly replied, "that the people cast aside usually hold the greatest value of all." He gave a single slow nod. The answer was more than enough. Outside, little Luna came running from the back lot, where she'd been drawing on discarded concrete with sidewalk chalk. She slammed into Theodore's waist, never even trying to slow down. Tiny arms squeezed his midsection. Then she studied Scarlet with the blunt honesty only a 6-year-old truly possesses. "You're leaving today?" she asked. "I am," Scarlet replied. The CEO crouched to Luna's eye level, a move she'd have struggled with just 3 weeks ago. "But I'll remember this place." Luna weighed those words with the heavy gravity she gave important things. "Remember it right," she said. "This is where my dad rebuilds engines. It's not a dump where people toss worthless scrap and walk away." The powerful CEO stared at her, glanced up at the struggling single dad, then back at Luna. "I know," she said softly. "I finally know the difference now." Theodore walked her out to the car. Late afternoon sunlight painted the shop's old green tin roof pure gold. She shook his hand. It wasn't some slick corporate transaction, just a quiet, genuine sign of mutual respect between two very different people. He stood there watching the sleek black car exit the lot and head east. Back toward Columbus, back to the glass tower and the true work of rebuilding what others had long since thrown away as scrap. Then he just walked back inside. Here's the secret. For 10 years, Scarlet Horn used his auto shop lot as a quiet graveyard to abandon every heavy burden she refused to carry. What she never grasped was that this mechanic had quietly picked up every single piece of discarded scrap. Not because anyone forced him, not for any selfish personal gain. He did not even have a grand master plan for them. But because he knew tossed-away things hold value, he never walked past wreckage without studying exactly where the damage truly lay. Figuring out what that damage meant, and whether someone could eventually use those lost pieces to uncover the truth. He was absolutely right that it would all matter someday. But between you and me, he never guessed how much patience someday would actually demand.